T. Eston Aletheia. I'm Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle Now. Bill, T. Eston Aletheia is what Pilate reportedly said. What is truth? And the reason why I asked that question today is because our friend, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, has been tagged by the Washington Post with a 4 Pinocchio rating for saying that her Medicare for All plan could take, which would cost $32 trillion, could take $21 trillion of that from the waste and mislaid money in the Pentagon budget. And so 2/3 of it would be paid for, and that doesn't even include the people who would be, of course, paying a portion of their Medicare. So, it's pretty much a done deal. The Washington Post said this statement of fact on her part was just not true for a variety of reasons, and I won't get too far into the weeds, but one of which was that the Pentagon figure comes from 17 years, and her figure on the Medicare for All comes from a 10-year period. Oh, and by the way, the $21 trillion that was sort of mislaid or wasted at the Pentagon is not just expenditures, but actual revenues. In other words, they've lost track for some time period of both spending and receiving of money. So, nevertheless, it raised the question for me as I was reading this Washington Post and realizing that I'm part of a dying breed of people who do that. Bill, does anyone really care about what's factually accurate when it comes to what politicians say?
Didn't she say when she was questioned about this that even though she may be factually...
Oh, please, do not get ahead of me. Do not get ahead of me.
I'm so sorry. Okay.
So well, just on the general question, does anybody care whether it's factually true or not?
Half the people in the country care. And it's a generalization, but you can make a pretty fair stab at it. The entire progressive philosophy is predicated on things that are impossible, spoken in such a way as they seem possible and therefore have emotional appeal. We talked about this on our Right Angle show on Ruth Bader Ginsburg, where a columnist said, if just 100,000 people could give 1 minute of their lives every day to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she'd live another 27 years or something like this. That may be the most perfect progressive statement I've ever heard. First of all, it's demanding a minute of the lives of 100,000 people in exchange to make one person live longer. That in itself is kind of indicative. But basically, it's the kind of statement from people who believe in things that are unbelievable. I know he's making a rhetorical point. I know he's not seriously soliciting minutes from people's lives. I understand that. But to make a statement like that indicates, how you feel about things.
He's just saying that the drones must give their lives for the life of the queen in order for the hive to survive.
Precisely, and the drones should be grateful for the chance too. Yes, so that's exactly what he's saying. And that's exactly what their philosophy is. Precisely correct. The drones and the workers must sacrifice their lives for the queen, for the safety and well-being and growth of the hive. And that, in fact, is exactly how Stalin and Mao put it. They basically said, we're going to take away religion, but don't worry, even though you as an individual die, the state that you've helped create will live forever. So I'm not a adherent to that particular religion. So the question is, are things true or not? The first question was, do people care about truth, yes or no? People who care about truth are generally called conservatives because conservatism is a look at how do we make the best world we can out of what is factually real, not out of what would be nice, like free healthcare. If healthcare were free, I would be in favor of free healthcare. 100%. As I've said, what kind of a jerk would I be to say no free healthcare for you? No, if healthcare were free, of course I'd be in favor of free healthcare for everybody, but it's not free. You have to pay for it. So now we're back in the world of reality. And now my position changes from being one of an extreme progressive to being one of a conservative to figure out what's the most cost-effective way to do this actual problem as well as possible, imperfectly. So yes, some people still care. And more importantly, I think rather than people caring about the truth is the idea that the entire idea of truth, the idea of truth as a concept, has been under attack from the left for 50 years now, as it has to be, Scott, because when you cannot get reality to confirm to your philosophy then it's obviously time to get a new reality.
Well, Bill, as you indicated earlier, when questioned about this, Representative Ocasio-Cortez indicated that we shouldn't get all hung up on the details of the facts and figures, that the real question is, why are so many people more concerned about that than they are about being morally right? And my question for you, Bill, is the Republican or conservative movement, which was buoyed greatly during the Reagan years by the moral majority and has been known through the years as being the party that cares more about values than it does about policy in many cases, or about even winning elections, has that group of people lost their moorings and had their message stolen by this morally right, liberal, progressive?
You've just completely crystallized my entire philosophy. Any philosophy predicated on something other than the truth is automatically not morally correct. It's not morally good. Any philosophy that's predicated on what might be possible or should be possible, but not on what is possible, is morally evil. Because what you're basically doing is you're telling a lie to people. You're telling them the lie that they want to hear. You're telling them the lie, Scott, that every decent person wants to hear. And you're telling them that you want the same goals as conservatives do, but instead of finding a way to deal with the reality of this is what it costs, this is how we can do it, here's what we have to allow for waste, here's what we have to allow for corruption. Not everybody's going to get what they want because nothing is perfect. What you're doing is you're promising people a perfect world that satisfies your emotional need to show everybody how good you are. And you kind of just let it drop at that. And if she wants to throw away numbers, like I've taken a look at the budget, turns out there's $21 trillion extra that we can spend on this. Well, turns out there's not. Well, doesn't really matter, does it? I mean, what I'm saying is right, isn't it? I mean, my entire idea is right, isn't it? And this is when you have to come back to, I'm rather proud of this sentence. Then you have to come back to the conservative reality. And the conservative reality is if healthcare were free, I'd be in favor of free healthcare, but it's not. So I'm not. And there you go. And if you do not base your philosophy on the truth, then by definition, you're basing it on lies. And lies are told by people who are aware of the consequences of telling people the truth.
Well, Bill, even though I got this story from the Washington Post, who had branded Ocasio-Cortez's statement about the Pentagon budget at Medicare for all as for Pinocchios and therefore false, the Washington Post, way down in the story, to their credit, way down in the story, mentioned the fact that over the course of President Trump's administration, they have branded his statements as falsehoods some 7,000 times. Now, let's grant that they were wrong 98% of the time on that. That still leaves a lot of lies, Bill. How can we back a president that when we say truth matters, not just moral correctness, and if you're not telling the truth, how can you be morally correct, when the president clearly is a stretcher?
Well, he's certainly a stretcher. And he's certainly factually incorrect about a number of things that he said. And Scotty, this is the Trump phenomenon, and we've discussed this before. I would prefer a president who was more informed and more open about being truthful than Donald Trump is. I've just come out and say it. That's what I would prefer. But that was not the choice that we were given in November. And the choice that we were given in November, we were given a choice between a president who rhetorically stretches the truth and may have a couple of facts simply incorrect, versus a woman whose entire political history has been one gigantic political lie, and the biggest political lie of Hillary Clinton's entire career was her marriage to Bill Clinton and this idea that they're a loving couple. It was a power relationship that she endured an enormous amount of humiliations for because her lust for power was so great. And she lied to the American people when she said that there were no secure emails. She lied when she said there were no secret emails. She lied when she didn't destroy any of the evidence. Lie. These are not little peccadillos. These are not a question of saying, I got the capital of Venezuela wrong or something. This is intentional lying for power. And I have not seen in Donald Trump's career, I have not seen him, at least it doesn't seem to me, I've never seen him lying for power. Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton do this professionally. And they're in a league of their own when it comes to this. So I don't like being able to say, hey, the reason I support this president is because he lies less than the other candidate. But that's where I find myself. I mean, that's really the answer.
Bill, I was giving a speech once, and it was to a group of conservatives. It was a local, either a Tea Party group or Republican group or something like that. And I mentioned a figure which at that time I thought to be the current national debt figure. At which point somebody in the audience interrupted me and spouted out a figure that was $3 trillion higher. At that moment, I stopped my prepared remarks and I said, you see, this is the problem with conservatives. It's the problem with us. We are so convinced that we have to be right about the factual details that we can't get the thrust of the matter. And in this case, the person thinks, I've got to be accurate on the matter, because on the numbers, because those represent individual people. But on a practical basis, Bill, situational ethically, don't you think conservatives are losing the battle when they get so caught up in the details that they can't see the forest for the trees? And Ocasio-Cortez is emoting all over the place and doing a dance routine, and people are falling in love with her.
She is, in fact, the ideal Democratic candidate. But Scott, you are onto something very, very important. I'm going to take a quick diversion to explain to you, I think, how this process works. So bear with me on this. A couple of years ago, I went to Las Vegas and I went to see the Michael Jackson show, the Cirque du Soleil Michael Jackson show. And in the middle of that show, there comes a moment when 4 or 5 dancers on each side of this enormous auditorium start moonwalking up the wall. They're walking backwards up both sides of the wall, 5 or 6 or 7 of them on either side. They're moonwalking up the wall, right? And so I watched this and I thought, okay, so how are they doing this? Okay, yeah, I got it. So you can just barely see there's a harness there and kind of very thin but dark wires, and it's obviously computer controlled, and they're running them back, and then these things do all, yeah. And so I, like most conservatives, I decided to break down this thing that's clearly not true. I know that people cannot walk up walls up backwards, or forwards for that matter. So immediately, as a conservative and as a practical person, I started looking at and trying to figure out how this was done. But they didn't put on the show so that I could figure out how it was done. They put on the show so that I could get the sensation of somebody walking backwards up a wall. And so when I say all of this, I say the problem with conservatives, and what I'm trying to do with all of the videos we do here, is I'm trying to teach conservatives how to not see the wires. How to not see the wires. We know that there are wires there. There are people in the audience who think he's really magically walking up a wall. Of course, we know that that's not the case, but we get so determined to try to figure out how this thing works that we deny ourselves the incredible, amazing visual experience of seeing people walking up walls backwards. And it's an amazing thing to watch. So yes, we've got to stop looking for the wires and start paying attention to the show. Because if we don't, we're going to get ourselves in a situation where we are today, which is where we have no ability to bring the truth to bear on issues because we become so mired in the minutia of it. And and more importantly than that, we are absolutely loath to use emotion in our arguments because we see how the left cheats with emotion. Everything that Ocasio-Cortez says is based on emotion, and therefore we say, well, this is just nonsense. We're not going to make an emotional appeal. We're going to make a factual appeal. Well, guess what? Factual appeals go into the cranium. They go into the cortex. They're analyzed if they're seen at all, and so on. Emotional appeals go right past that. They go directly into the subconscious, go directly into the heart, and people don't vote on how they think. They vote on how they feel. And this is why we're getting overrun by this philosophy that is so demonstrably false and evil that if we would just take a step back on it, we would be able to say and call it what it is. So instead of arguing with her about the numbers, right? Instead of us saying, well, she says it's 21 trillion, but we think the number is actually closer to 17 trillion or 30 trillion. So no. You have to come out and say, this is a fantasy. She is saying that unicorns are going to deliver the mail on the spikes. They're going to come to your house day by day, and rainbows are going to shoot out of their butt when they hand you your paychecks. That's what she's saying to you. She is telling you that unicorns are going to deliver you free $100 bills on the tip of their horn, and you can either believe her or not believe her, but the lie she is telling now is the exact same lie as the unicorn lie, and I am willing to grant that she is not smart enough to understand that what she's talking about is impossible, but I believe that you are, and I know that I am. So why don't we just do that and just say no? No, it's not a question of the money. It's not a question of the amounts. It's not possible to provide the most expensive services in the world at no cost. It's not possible. It's not possible. You need not to get an education. You need to grow up. You need to grow up, Ms. Ocasio-Cortez. You need to grow up, and you need to, if you really want to help the people of your district, and if you really want to help poor people and all the people you claim to be a champion of, and I'm not denying that you're a champion of those people, and I'm not impugning your motives in that regard, but if you're serious about helping people, then you have to understand that the world does function according to rules that don't change based on what you wish they would be. And therefore, if you actually genuinely cared about the people in your communities, like Republicans do, then you would understand that this business of talking about things that are impossible and making impossible promises not only doesn't make you a good person, it makes you an evil person, because by promising something that's impossible, you have prevented people from taking the action to create an imperfect, flawed, big improvement.
Well, he's got no strings to hold him up, and 5 days a week, Bill Whittle works without a net here on Bill Whittle Now, and we appreciate the members at BillWhittle.com who've made this show possible. We'll continue to produce this 5 days a week because those people went to BillWhittle.com, clicked that Become a Member link, and signed up on a monthly or annual basis to become perpetual citizen producers so that these conversations can be spread around the world. I'm Scott Ott for Bill Whittle Now. Thanks for watching.